Welcome to the global phenomenon, Surviving the Survivor. If you have a mom, you'll love our podcasts. Here are your hosts, former Fox News political correspondent Joel Waldman and his mom, Carmela, a licensed marriage therapist and Holocaust survivor.
Carm, we're back at it, and we are mid-30s.
Come on, Joel, move out more, like completely out.
We are mid-30s. Carm, I said, you don't produce the show. You just sit there. You're the talent. You're the diva. I like to slide away. When I'm in a bar, I sit in a corner. I do the same thing on my podcast.
Okay.
So, yesterday, sadly, in Hollywood, Florida, a police officer was shot. So I covered that story yesterday. No one in the world, except news people, have any clue what goes into putting together a 2-minute story, but let's leave it at this. It's absolutely stressful, exhausting, and you're constantly looking at the clock, and it's day in and day out, and it's what have you done for me lately? So I finished doing that, and then you tell me that you forgot everything that you read in Marc's book, which is great since we have the interview with him today, but you take no blame. Instead, you say to me, listen to this podcast. It'll really inform you. So I got home last night at about 12:30. I'm in my driveway. I had to pee so badly that I didn't want to wake anyone up that I went into a Fiji water bottle in the car, then poured it on my front lawn, and then proceeded.
Your lawn will die from it.
It's a myth. And then I sat there and listened to literally 3 hours worth of podcasts in the driveway. Some guy walked by twice. I live in the tiniest little secure community. He probably thought I was doing weird stuff in the car. But needless to say, I am super, super excited for a number of reasons. Marc Polymeropoulos, our main schmooze today, spent 26 years as a covert spy for the CIA, living in the shadows. But before he was hidden by those shadows, he was one of my closest friends growing up. I've known him since second grade. We've interviewed a lot of Highland Park luminaries, Sam Hoffman, the great David Camp, Willie Garson, may he rest in peace, did not do our show, the great Jim Axelrod from CBS News. But there is no one with the accolades, the bravery, the courage, and the kindness and the likability of our guest today, the great Marc Polymeropoulos, who has 14 letters in his last name, who I literally played high school tennis with. He went and worked to keep our country safe, and we're going to speak to him right after this break.
Do you want to help my son? His company, Content Partners Media, specializes in brand video and content creation for innovative companies and others. Please go to www.contentpartnersmedia.com and hire him. I repeat, please go to www.contentpartnersmedia.com.
Welcome back to Surviving the Survivor. It's time now for the main schmooze.
So, Carm, a couple of weeks ago, we had on a former corporal in the Marine Corps who happened to be a sniper, a complete badass, and I could have talked to him for 73 hours. He was telling us about targets he was taking out and all that sort of thing. Today, we upped that by like 97 degrees here with a former CIA covert op, a person that you actually know, Marc Polymeropoulos. How do you know him, Carm?
I can't tell.
You may end up in prison, but you can speak.
What?
You can speak.
Well, I know Marc when he was, second grader?
Second grade.
To the end of high school, and then I lost him, and now I found him again.
Yeah, I have known Marc. I figured this out for 45 years. Welcome to Surviving the Survivor, Marc. How are you?
Thanks so much for being here. This is awesome. I mean, I do a lot of these podcasts. I do tons of stuff on media, but I haven't done something like this where people I've known basically my whole life. And so this is fantastic. I got a huge smile on my face. So thanks for having me.
The whole town will be talking about this. So let me tell everybody about Marc for those who don't know him. Marc Polymeropoulos, which I believe has 14 letters. Am I correct about that? See, I remember that from second grade. He retired from the Senior Intelligence Service ranks in 2019 after serving for 26 years in the intelligence community in operational field and leadership assignments. He's an expert in counterterrorism, covert action, and human intelligence collection. He is a real live former spy. Marc is one of the intelligence community's most highly decorated field officers. From what I understand, he was basically the equivalent of a 4-star general in the military, which is pretty damn high. And he has honed a unique leadership style based on common sense. He has a book out right now that is a must-read called Clarity in Crisis. Carmela's going to hold it up. Clarity in Crisis, Leadership Lessons from the CIA. And he discusses all the stuff I just mentioned in the book and much more. So buy it, read it, study it. Marc's greatest achievement, besides having children, he hails from the great city town of Highland Park, New Jersey, where he famously, he might get mad at me now, punched our friend in the face after Bill Buckner let a ball pass through his legs as the Red Sox lost the '86 World Series to the amazing Mets. It happened in Jessica Pasmont's house. I remember
God.
It's hard to believe how long ago that was. That is when we knew that Marc would be, in fact, a badass. Marc.
That was it. All right, I'll take that.
So,
what an intro.
Listen, 26 years in the quote unquote in the shadows. The one thing I hope that comes of this podcast, I think so fondly of our childhood, hope that we can stay in touch. I know Matt and I have been talking, but it is honestly, truly great to see you. I'm glad you survived those 26 years in the shadows, because I know there were some hairy moments. But let's start with your book first, because I think that's most important. What was you're retired. You could be sitting on your ass. What prompted you to write this? And just tell us briefly, what is common sense leadership? Because I have one.
Well, first of all, it's great being here again. I'm thrilled, and I can't believe you remember that time. It's pretty relevant when I punched Carol Struminger in the face. I remember who it was.
That's a guy, by the way. I don't want to.
That's right. But and ultimately, the Red Sox are playing in the playoffs now, so I'm the same kind of insane lunatic. I think the Red Sox lost last night, and I threw my cell phone across the room, almost broke it. My wife yelled at me. So same thing.
By the way, Marc is wearing a polo today. Every other podcast I've seen him on, he's either got a baseball shirt, Nats shirt, or something else. I appreciate that. I obviously retired after 26 years at CIA, and at the end of my career, it's interesting because I got to be almost too senior to have fun. So as an operational case officer, when I was serving overseas in all these embassies throughout the Middle East, my job as an operations officer was to spot, assess, develop, recruit, and handle spies. These are agents. These are foreigners we recruit to help the United States government. That's where I'm running surveillance detection routes. I'm doing brush passes and back alleys of these Arab capitals. That was really fun and exciting. And then unfortunately, you get promoted. So then, as the last several years of my career, I got promoted to the ranks, in essence, where I dealt with personnel and budgets and really big picture stuff, which is important. But I wasn't enjoying it as much. But what did I enjoy? So I enjoyed kind of the mentorship aspect with younger officers. And then I started thinking about, what was my legacy going to be at CIA? And I have all these fancy hardware from all these intelligence medals, all these great operations that sit in my basement. I'll go down and have a scotch, whatever. So I think that I'm great, but I'm really, but that doesn't matter. And so I thought, how can I leave a legacy? And so I started thinking that by the end of my career, I really did hone this leadership style where I was comfortable in times of gray, in times of ambiguity, certainly in times of crisis. But my happy place was when there was a lack of situational awareness. Everyone wanted to flee. I was comfortable there, and I was making good leadership decisions. So I said to myself, I think there's something here. And then I kind of dissected, a whole bunch of principles on how I would create teams that would be able to succeed, in times of crisis. And so when I retired, I decided, look, I'm going to write a book on this. I'm not going to write a book. It's not an autobiography. I'm not going to write a book like all my friends are in the Navy SEALs, and they always get mad at me that when they go through BUDS training, when they go through dive training, they get a book deal, and then they write a book and they're thumping their chest. How great! That's not what this book is about.
This book is more real. It's about, overcoming adversity. So I thought it would actually be helpful, just kind of for the general population. So I got out, and I was very fortunate to get a nice book deal from Harper Collins, and then here we are. And so it's been a lot of fun. And because, I have my weird world of special operations and intelligence, and everyone gets it, but it's more rewarding to me when I go talk to the Fairfax County Public School Teachers Conference, which I just did. Mm-hmm. And they really liked the principles in the book. So I like doing that now. And that's kind of my passion now.
I mean, if someone says, hey, Marc, what is the single most important trait to being a good leader? What's your answer?
Humility. So easy. I love that question. And again, this is coming from someone, I lived in this, world of type A alpha male and alpha females. But humility is I think the greatest trait, because I also, I was in an environment where, there was tremendous reward, tremendous success. I ran operations that saved American lives, but then there was also enormous failure as well. I had officers of mine who were killed, agents, people we recruited who were killed tragically. And so it's just the idea of being humble. Don't believe your own hype, and you can be an elite performer. And if you are an elite performer, having that sense of humility, I think, is really important. And so for me, that's an easy answer to a question I'm often asked. But I think the single best character trait of a CIA officer was the ability to stay humble.
Marc, Carmela has raised her hand.
All right.
Carmela?
Humility, I see you listed first, but I think one of the signs of a leader that you had, and I don't know if you already had it in elementary school, but you project calm.
Right.
Okay. In moments of crisis, like when you described when you were attacked, right, and people had to go under tables. And that trait of being calm.
It is interesting. By the way, we had another guest on who was just real quick, real interesting. His name was Major R.E.A. Fishbein.
Major. General.
All right, Major, whatever. But anyway, he's a general in the Israeli army. He was in charge of the missile defense system for the IDF. And one thing he said, this goes to your point, I'm not cutting you off. We had an argument about who cuts off who more. So
I'm counting.
That's the backstory to this. But this general in the Israeli army who was in charge of the missile defense system said that you can pick leaders out on the playground in kindergarten. That you can
No. That's not what he said.
Oh, geez.
He said charismatic leaders you can. Technically good leaders you can train. But the charismatically, and he made a separation, but it's neither here nor there. My question is to you is this trait of calm under pressure, which neither of us have. We both go, all over the place. So I was wondering if this is something you think genetically you got, or trained yourself to be calm under pressure, or how do you explain that trait?
I met Marc's mother when she was alive, and she was a great woman. And the answer is right there. Compare his mother to you, and you got the
stop.
answer.
Oh, come on! I love this. By the way, the idea of this the show is fabulous. I think this is going to be a massive hit. I love this.
Thank you.
No, but we are not doing this for fun. I am very serious.
Yeah. I know you are.
I think the calm is. Yeah. I know it's fun. I know. I'm just kidding. The calm is something that you have in your personality. I mean, there are a lot of other interesting things that you have in your personality.
Let him answer now. Let him answer.
All right. So what an interesting question. So let me tackle this a couple ways. First is, I think, leaders are not necessarily born. Leaders certainly can be developed, and that's really important to note. But the principle you're talking about, it's one of the principles of the book, what I call win an Oscar, which is the idea that as a leader, you're always on stage. And so I tell a whole bunch, one of the things about the book that's fun is I tell great war stories, because I was very fortunate the CIA, through the Publication Review Board, they cleared a lot of these stories for me to use in the book. And I think, what you were referring to was when I was in an embassy that was attacked by Al-Qaeda, a car bomb hit the back gate, didn't detonate. The assault force was hitting the front of the embassy, and we're breaking open the weapon safe, and we're putting people in body armor, under the table. And afterwards, and everyone survived, thank God. But afterwards, people had said to me that, you seemed really cool and calm. Meanwhile, the truth is my heart rate went, from 0 to 100 over, in a second. I was terrified, but but I did kind of possess a certain amount of calm. Although I didn't tell him that, hey, everything is, this is no big deal. I mean, the embassy was under attack, so you have to be honest with your employees. But I think that ultimately it's a trait that you actually develop over time and with experience. And so I wouldn't have reacted that way, early on in my career. I might have, not necessarily panicked, but I might have been much more, emotional about this. And so ultimately, one of the things that I think is, and I tell this to I would tell this to young officers all the time, as they were kind of always clamoring to get promoted and go to the top, is that there's nothing beats experience. Because at the end of the day, the reason why we did so well that day was because I was the deputy station chief. The station chief and I, and he was a former Navy SEAL, but we had both been in Iraq years earlier together and been under fire because we had that experience already. And so to me, that concept of winning an Oscar is number one. It's important to kind of talk about, but a lot of that is based on having experienced certain situations over time and how you react to that. And a key part of this, though, as well, really is also to be authentic and to be honest with your officer. So again, I didn't say, hey, no big deal, let's go order a pizza now. Well, first of all, no one's going to answer the phone because we're getting shot at. But I'm also, but I can say something like, hey, if we go through the training, everybody do the things that we've kind of drilled and done before, we're going to make it through this okay. Even if I didn't believe that, that's what I said. But ultimately, it's a principle that I love because I think you just never, you can never forget as a leader that all eyes are on you all the time.
One of the other, first of all, I chuckled at this. Marc says that being a spy is the second oldest profession in the world. Right. What outside of humility, what makes a great spy?
So I think that if you decide to join the intelligence community and you want to go, you can become an analyst, which is where you're based in the United States, at CIA headquarters, and it can be very rewarding. And basically, you're writing kind of papers and analysis for policymakers, and so you have a lot of interaction in the Washington D.C. community. And then you can go overseas, as what I did was as a case officer, an operations officer, where you're trained to handle agents. And with that, you have to have, Joel's a great question because what do you need? Well, people, and I talk to college kids all the time. I have like 6 emails I have to answer today from college kids saying, what class should I take at Georgetown? And my response is going to be, it doesn't matter. You have to have a couple things. One is a sense of adventure. You have to have a sense of interest in the world. Remember, when you go overseas, you're not living in America anymore. And I actually don't want you hanging out at the embassy. I want you on the street. So you better love funny cultures, funny food, different smells and tastes. Large portions of the world are not as developed as ours. So you got to be comfortable living in places where there's no power, or power is going to go out, or there's going to be some, nasty cockroaches in your apartment. And so you have to have that kind of sense and adventure. But it's really this kind of willingness to be open-minded about the rest of the world. And you can believe that America is the greatest country on the planet, but you also have to understand that you have to, have this open mind to other places and cultures. And then the last point, which is critical, again, what people ask me is, you got to learn a foreign language. So, we don't go and speak English, necessarily to the entire planet. So you have to have not only a willingness to do it, but an interest in that as well, because if we're going to be successful against the Russians or the Chinese or the Iranians, you have to learn Russian, Chinese, or Farsi. Period.
How did you learn Arabic? How long did that take you?
So it took 2 years. That's 2 years of a training cycle. So my operational training, how to kind of conduct the tradecraft training, how to operate as an intelligence officer, takes about a year. But that's 2 additional years of training when you learn a foreign language. And because again, it's not being able to walk down the street and say hi. I have to be able to debrief someone. And if they're telling me about the nuclear program of Iran, I better be able to understand what they're saying. But the foreign language is the absolute key attribute, or the key kind of the key part of one's background.
That would have knocked me out. I have no ability with foreign language. I cheated off my mom in Miss Manella's French class because she spoke French. And the funny story about that? God, there's so many childhood stories I remember. But my mother went to a parent-teacher conference night. Did you take French or did you take? I think you took.
I did.
You did with Miss Manella. And Carmela came back from a parent-teacher conference one night. She goes, "I just realized something." And I said, "What?" She goes, "Your French teacher doesn't speak French," because Carmela did.
Because I studied there.
Carm, your hand is raised again.
No, but listen, I am trying to understand you since we lost track after high school.
Sure.
Now, you wanted to go into the CIA. That was your passion, and that's where you felt you belonged. But once you got there, you worked for 3 years on a desk job, right?
Yep.
And then you requested to go out in the field. And I'm trying to understand what motivated you to face such level of danger.
Well, it's not danger. I mean, at the end of the day, I wanted to be one of the fighter pilots, and so the CIA is made up of great folks. So you have the analysts we talked about before. There's the support officers who are absolutely critical. Logistics and finance officers. There's our technical officers who kind of build satellites or build spy gadgets. But then the case officers, the operations officers, these are the fighter pilots. They're the tip of the spear, and frankly, that's what I wanted to be. And so when I started off as an analyst for the first 2 years, that was actually good for me because, I certainly, I came out of grad school. I went to undergrad and grad school at Cornell. So I kind of gravitated towards the analytics side. But, it all started in 1995. I think I went on a temporary duty assignment for 3 months out to the Middle East. And that's when I really kind of got the bug and saying, look, I want to be on the operational side. I want to be, a case officer, and I want to live and work overseas. And kind of, and move to that area. And so, the story, it's in the book, is I went to my boss on the analytics side, a guy by the name of John Brennan. He was my group chief.
Well, he was not John Brennan then.
Yes.
Yeah. So I went to see John Brennan.
He was going to be John Brennan.
He was just John.
I said to him, hey, do you mind, is it okay if I make the switch, the transition? And it's a little bit difficult, but it's possible. And he said, Mark, no problem. Just go. And he didn't really stop me from going. And afterwards, as I joked with him later on, when he was the director of the CIA and I would go brief him, we would joke about that incident. I said, I must have been the worst analyst of all time because you didn't even stop me from leaving. But no, to his credit, he wanted me to stay in the organization. And so, off I went to the operational side. That's where I belonged, and so, it's not unlike anything else in life. Your first job is not necessarily one where you're going to stay. And fortunately for me, I stayed within CIA. And then went off on this kind of crazy life and career, which I lived, all over the Middle East, and my kids grew up in multiple countries, all over. And I tell you, at one point we came back in 2010 to the United States, and my son, who was 8 years old at the time, was amazed that there was grass on a little league baseball field. He was used to be playing on the dirt baseball fields in the Middle East. So no, but it was a lot of fun. And so it was.
Do your kids speak Arabic?
Well, they learned when they were there and they forgot it all.
Uh-huh.
So they have a couple words here and there. But we made the decision to bring them back when they were relatively young. My daughter's 21 now. My son's 19. They're 2 years apart. But they, after we essentially wanted them both to go to kind of high school back here in the U.S. and they did. So that was important.
I thought it was bad for me. My wife threatened to divorce me when I was at Fox News Channel because I was traveling to Milwaukee for conventions and stuff. So,
right.
By the way, it's amazing that Marc ever got into the CIA because they ran background checks on him and talked to people like me and other friends from Highland Park. So it's a miracle he ever got in the first place. I am anxious as always. We have limited time and I want to get through a lot of crap. So I've got to run this along. Afghanistan, you talked about Brennan and your former boss, Bob Gates. He was just on 60 Minutes this past week and basically said Afghanistan was an unmitigated screw up. Do you agree with that intelligence assessment on his part?
Well, I mean, boy, that's a complicated question. I spent several weeks, just several weeks ago, talking about this nonstop on every network. I was on CNN and MSNBC and Fox, and because ultimately, I think there's a couple of important points. One is I think that in my view, the CIA's role in Afghanistan over 2 decades, I think there's a lot to celebrate because ultimately we did not get hit again by a terrorist attack. And that was kind of the core mission of the Central Intelligence Agency, was to ensure that the homeland was not hit. And in fact, we really did degrade core Al-Qaeda and to the point where the attrition was pretty astounding. Now, the withdrawal from Afghanistan is controversial. Interestingly enough, it's something that both administrations took on board, which is kind of a surprise. So the Trump administration started this. The Biden administration kind of finished it, both against the advice of basically the entire national security establishment, who, and myself and others, really wanted. I think we could have had a small residual force and could have stayed. And so when Bob Gates, talks about the disaster, I think that it's probably multifaceted. We stayed there too long, but in essence, I think, leaving a force of about 2,500 would have been a lot smarter, because ultimately you can't argue with what occurred, which is a very chaotic withdrawal, the loss of our embassy, the loss of the Afghan government and our only partner in Central Asia, and still tens of thousands of Afghan special immigrant visa applicants, who we really owe a lot to, who are still stuck there. So not a great moment, and I think there's a lot of blame to go around on, just about for everybody in the political establishment.
I think a lot of people, if you're sitting in, again, I don't want to pick on Wisconsin, or you're sitting in Wisconsin or Oklahoma, you kind of say to yourself, you're working at a gas station or wherever you're working, why do we care about Afghanistan?
Sure.
From a guy that's been there, why is it so important?
Well, because ultimately ungoverned spaces is what allows for terrorist movements that threaten America. It allows them to rise, to kind of fester, and we've seen that historically. We certainly saw that in Afghanistan, before 9/11 in 1996 when the Taliban took over. In that 5 years, that's certainly where Al Qaeda flourished. We see that all over Africa. Ungoverned spaces are bad, and so my argument, and again, this is not something there's consensus in the United States, but I am someone who believes we should have forward presence. And so, it's a concept of defending forward. And look, CIA is a overseas organization. We never come home. U.S. military may deploy and then come back. We never come back. We're always there. So I think that having, small residual, force structures in, all over the world is just fine. If we left 2,500 intelligence and special operations personnel in Afghanistan, that is not being at war in Afghanistan. That's just something we should have done. That's my view. Some people think otherwise, but that's really.
I find it interesting. First of all, that it's a two-pronged question. I find it interesting that you openly said that your organization, the CIA, was opposed to this withdrawal, complete, not 2,500.
Right.
And the other is that. Now, wait a second. Now
she has a senior moment every day.
Every session I have several senior moments because I want to be so clever.
Time is of the essence today, Carm.
Okay.
No pressure.
But the other part is that I am truly amazed.
Don't cheat
because
off my
I'm
notes.
very naive. I am amazed that they let you speak. So the CIA allows to you or authorizes you or gives its seal of approval to share so much of your information.
That is a great question because I had the same question. How the hell are you allowed to talk to us?
Why
There's something called a board of review that tells you.
No, so basically, when you join the CIA, you sign what's called a secrecy agreement, and you're bound to that for your life. And so ultimately, I'm not allowed to ever reveal classified information, and that makes sense. And I of course support this. But when you retire, you do have First Amendment rights. And what I do is in all my book. When I wrote the book and all my time speaking, I have kind of themes that I get cleared by the CIA's Publication Review Board. So in essence, when I'm talking to you about this stuff, it's been cleared already by the CIA, and so and I think that's a good thing because at the end of the day, we live in a democracy, and you want to have even your secret intelligence organizations. There has to be some accountability, and it's okay for people to come out. As long as you get things blessed by the agency's censors, for lack of a better term, it's a good thing to talk about this. That's what happened when I left. When I was about to retire, I talked to George Tenet and Mike Morrell, two former CIA directors, and I said, "Look, I think there's huge misconceptions about the agency. I want to go out and be one of these few former officials who talk openly about it, adhering to my secrecy agreement, but giving the American people an idea of what the CIA is about, because I believe it's an indispensable organization." But that means talking about these things. And so, and ultimately, as long as I get things cleared by the agency, I remain in good standing. And I think, in the age of open source data, explosion of artificial intelligence, we better be able to justify the existence of a secret intelligence organization. And in doing so, it's important for people to talk about it, and warts and all. And so you talk about successes, you talk about failures. And I think that's a good thing. That's how that's why America is different, and why kind of democracy works. Because ultimately, the American people are going to have to decide on whether an institution is worth it or not. And if they don't know about it, that's not a good thing.
And as with most things human, there is more negative reaction and prejudice than positive. Like you genuinely seem to be proud of what you did and you in the book, and you genuinely seem to love the whole the organization.
Well, that's right, and that's 100% correct.
Yeah, you are a good ambassador for them.
But but also what's important too is I'm not going to gloss over the failures. There have been some significant failures of the intelligence community, and number one, that's the nature of the intelligence business. But number two, we have to learn from these, and you have to grow. So the CIA's analytic call that Iraq had WMD was a terrible mistake. Now. We have grown from that, and so I don't think analysts will make that same mistake in the future. But you can't gloss it over. I can't defend that. You have to admit it. I mean, and so taking ownership of the bad is just as important as celebrating the good. But you're right, ultimately, that our successes are never talked about, and our failures are splashed all over the newspaper.
Yeah, all over.
But you sign up for that. I would tell my officers all the time. That's what you sign up for if you want to join the CIA. You're going to get beat up a little bit sometimes, and that's okay. And you have to have that intestinal fortitude.
Ironically, I had to sign a secrecy agreement myself at Fox News. But moving along here, so you have one awesome story that I know I've heard a few times. Tell us about Kandahar 2002. You almost froze to death and you almost died. What happened?
So this is an interesting story in that. There's a couple aspects of this that I found that was fascinating. First and foremost. When I was living in Highland Park, New Jersey, my mom gave me a book called Caravan by James Michener, and it was a book about a young Foreign Service officer in the post-war period, State Department, who went to Afghanistan, and that at that time Afghanistan in the 1950s was a very different place, exotic, but certainly not racked by kind of this extreme fundamentalist movement that's taken over there. But I was romanced by this. By the notion of serving or of what Afghanistan was about. Years later, I go right after 9/11. I go on one of the teams to Kandahar, and in that, and we ran an operation with the Special Forces unit where we're going to try to in essence talk to a village leader in Helmand province in the middle of nowhere, but he was harboring a mid-level Taliban member. And I remember as I was sitting there, sitting cross-legged, from this Taliban, from this village elder. I thought back to that book, and it was extraordinary, the journey I had. Reading that book in Highland Park, New Jersey, all of a sudden, in early 2002, I'm in Helmand province in Afghanistan. Now, the story is interesting because ultimately the Taliban had co-opted the village, and the village elder was lying to us, and they actually had set up an ambush for us, and a local interpreter tipped us off. And I remember sitting with the U.S. Special Forces captain, and in essence, threatening the Taliban, threatening the village elder that, if anything happened to us, good things would not happen to his village. We had an aircraft above us. And after that, we had to drive 13 hours back through the desert to get back to Kandahar. And so that was pretty extraordinary and miserable. Although I gained a lot of trust with my Special Forces colleague, because I kind of sat in the back with all the Afghan indigenous forces, and it was freezing cold. But it was the point. There's a lot of points of that story, but it's one is kind of my journey from Highland Park all the way to Helmand province, which is extraordinary. And then number two was I kind of did something there to gain the trust of my Special Forces teammates by sitting in the back, not in the warm cab for 13 hours and being pretty miserable. But you never forget those moments. That was pretty extraordinary.
Okay, question. When you started with them, there was no internet, correct?
Right.
So
dating us.
Do you want?
Al Gore created the internet.
Yeah.
Anyway, listen. You actually walked into a different CIA.
Oh yeah. Yep.
What's interesting too? You started at the CIA in I think '93, right? So
that's right.
You were there for the first World Trade Center bombing, which I want to get to, the second one, and the whole shebang. But before we get there, this has been all over the news, and was in the news recently, and this is what is known as Havana Syndrome, or directed energy attacks. First of all, I've noticed a lot of people have not asked you this question. How are you feeling today?
So I'm feeling okay, not great. I've had a headache for 4 years. So I still get these terrible migraines and dizziness and vertigo. I'm still getting treated at Walter Reed's, traumatic brain injury center. I'm there, several times a week. It's something that caused my retirement. And it's a debilitating injury. So it has not been easy, but that's why, I can do a podcast like this. Everyone says, hey, Marc, you're fine. You look normal, but I got a nasty headache and I'll be tired after this. So, it's my bandwidth is just not the same as it used to be. But it's something that I have to live with now and have to accept. And so there are things I can do and things I can't do. Yes, I've some good days, some bad days, but the headache is always there.
Can you tell us kind of what was going on when you thought you were targeted? You were in Moscow, I believe,
sure,
right?
Yeah. So, this all starts, I think it started in the Soviet Union, but the Russians, certainly have always been bombarding our embassy in Moscow with kind of, with microwave energy. In essence, it signals intelligence collection systems. They wanted to find out what, people in the residence were doing, people in the embassy was doing. So there's been a history of this. And I preface this because then in 2016 in Havana, Cuba, the U.S. embassy officers there were targeted by this. And there's multiple kind of very severe injuries that occurred. I went to Moscow in December of 2017 as part of a regular trip. At that time, I was the deputy chief of operations of clandestine operations over Europe and Eurasia. So a big role. I went to talk to the ambassador there, John Huntsman, who was a famous, very well-known statesman, former governor, ambassador in Beijing, then ambassador in Moscow. And I was there also to meet my Russian security service counterparts.
His daughter is a Fox News Channel anchor.
Yeah.
Wonder how she got the job.
So, but ultimately, early on in that trip in December 2017, I woke up in the middle of the night to an incredible case of vertigo, tinnitus, which is ringing in my ears, severe headaches. And I've had that ever since, almost for 4 years. And ultimately, this kind of came out in public when I was really, pressing and struggling with the CIA to obtain healthcare. And they were denying this for a long time. And so finally in October 2019, well after I retired, I chose a journalist, Julia Yaffe, who at that time was writing for GQ, who was a fantastic journalist, a Russian expert, speaks native Russian. And she kind of told my story and my plea for healthcare. And the agency ended up finally sending me to Walter Reed. So
But what is the prognosis?
Well, the prognosis is that I suffered a traumatic brain injury, and that's something that, can never be, you can't take that back. And so the whole idea now is, as I get treated at, for the TBIs, how do I kind of live my life and make myself feel better? Because this isn't going to go away. And that's kind of the scary thing with a lot of the victims is that, people think you can get treated for a couple months and then you're fine. Now, sometimes you can, but sometimes you can't. So it's something that I'm going to have to live with, my whole life, which is not really the most pleasant thought, but that's my reality. It's just that's what I have to accept now.
I'm kind of slow on the uptake. This is the part I didn't get. What do you mean the CIA didn't want to give you the health care necessary? I mean, obviously you have benefits, right? You retire with full benefits, but what?
Right.
They just didn't think it was...
I needed to get to a specialized place like Walter Reed,
Gotcha.
to a serious traumatic brain injury center. And the agency for a long time didn't believe me or others. Under the previous administration, and this is I'm not dinging the White House on this, but this is the time frame. Under the previous administration, the previous leadership of the agency, they were not taking this as seriously, and the current administration is. And the new CIA director, Bill Burns, I think really believes us because there is an ongoing controversy. I think there's predominantly now the medical profession believes this is very real. But for a while, because again, it's a silent wound. People didn't believe us, and so with some of my colleagues who are being treated at Walter Reed's Traumatic Brain Injury Center, you go through something called art therapy, and I've talked a lot about this. I went on CNN with this. I went on CBS This Morning with Catherine Herridge, showed some artwork. In art therapy, one of my colleagues had painted this giant black canvas, and on it there was a splotch of red, and he called it the gunshot. And what he meant was, this was the moral injury he suffered because he wished he had been shot. He wished there was a physical injury in which someone could see and understand and believe us and know how to treat it. And that's not the case with this. And so, this is a tough one for a lot of people, including for myself. I mean, in terms of kind of, you're kind of, keeping your, or having, staying healthy, mentally, because you don't see this at all. And just, if I wasn't talking about this now, you would leave and say, Marc seems fine, except, you don't know that I have a terrible headache and I'm going to be tired after this. And next week I have a lot of things scheduled I have to do. And I wonder, am I going to get a bout of vertigo and have to cancel it? Or am I going to be fine? I just went to Tampa, gave a speech. It was great. But I was supposed to be up at Harvard giving a speech 2 weeks ago up in Boston. I had to cancel the whole thing because the vertigo came back. So it's pretty nasty what's happened. And so it's part of the reality I have now.
And people don't realize that I had vertigo once.
Yeah.
And so people don't realize how unbelievably unpleasant and horrible vertigo is.
I would agree.
You said something interesting, though. You said that the intelligence community will find out who's doing this, and then what is the price that needs to be paid at that point? So
that's wow, Joel, what an awesome question, and I think that's as right now, like I will get, as we're talking for an hour, I'll have 4 emails that I'll have to, or maybe I won't. Sometimes I choose not to respond to with different press inquiries about this, because the press is always trying to chase the last attack. And you just saw there was just a recent event at the U.S. Embassy in Bogota, Colombia. And that's interesting and it's important, but they're missing the story, because the real story is at some point, the intelligence community and the CIA set up a task force, and they've taken the team that found Osama bin Laden and they've put them on this. So we're going to get to the bottom of this. But the real story is, and you've lived in DC, so you know this, is what is the policy response going to be? Once we determine which adversary has done this, it's pretty extraordinary, because as Senator Susan Collins has said many times, and she's been a huge advocate of ours, this is an act of war. And so what is the U.S. if the U.S. finds out it is Russia or anyone else, what's the policy response? And I don't care if it's the Biden administration or a future Republican administration afterwards, it's going to come in conflict with whatever they wanted to do. And so because this is really serious. And there's going to be a lot of eyes on any administration, because the U.S. officials who have been, like me, really kind of severely injured by this. And so I think that's the real story that I wish the press would cover, the policy responses, because once there is a determination made, it's going to go from 0 to 100, because there's going to be really a demand for us to hold those who did this accountable.
I mean, you believe it's an act of war, and you even said that sanctions are not going to be enough.
Well, no, they've permanently crippled, perhaps, dozens or even several
hundreds.
Right. And so I agree with you. And, but then, of course, there's going to be people who are going to say, what, are we going to start World War III with Russia because of this? And so, this gets into a whole other different topic, because I think we're in an age of what we call, hybrid warfare or gray zone operations. And so, but hybrid warfare means, it's not a shooting war between adversaries, but there's a lot that's going on under the surface. And I think the whole Havana Syndrome thing really falls exactly into that. And so, and the U.S. is not good at responding to this. And we're losing to China on this. We're losing to Russia on this. But we have to find ways to hit back and hit back hard. Of course, we're a democratic country, and we're dealing with autocratic societies that certainly don't play by those rules.
This brings me to maybe this is classified and you took an oath on it, but if it's possible, I'm curious, are you cooperating between intelligence organizations internationally with others? Because I know that I watched the program where they said that the internet warfare,
This wasn't Homeland on Showtime, was it?
No, it wasn't.
Okay, continue.
I never watched that.
You want to know if foreign intelligence agencies speak to United States intelligence agencies?
Yeah, of course.
I know they do. I know that, but in this in the
spit it out, Carm.
It's not so easy when I want to. It doesn't come out. So the point is that there is a warfare that is non-military with guns, but it's happening on the internet. If they break into your information, or if
you're talking about cyber.
Cyber. That was the word that I couldn't find.
Cyber operations.
People have to help me.
No. But I think you're 100% right. The cyber operations that are being done against us fall exactly in that hybrid warfare category. So ultimately, if adversaries, and we've seen the Russians do this, of course, all over the world. There was just German elections, and the Germans were complaining that the Russians were interfering, and so electoral interference, or years ago, there's the famous episode or a couple episodes where the Russians took down parts of the Ukrainian infrastructure, the power grid. And so these are things that I think we have to be really...
Even hospitals, they attack hospitals.
The famous thing about the United States here. So this is 1,000% right, but we are not as good at doing this. Now, we can build defensive capability, which we haven't been very good at, but we can do that. But I would argue that we have to have an offensive capability too, and a willingness to use it. And I think that's where, this really interesting discussion in national security circles, is going. I'm actually, I'll give you a scoop. It'll be announced in 10 days. I'm going to be a non-resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council, which is a really prominent think tank in DC. But it's going to be, but the RIT what we're going to do is I'm going to be involved in their project on understanding hybrid warfare and what we call gray zone operations. And so because they saw me as someone who's been a victim of this, and so I think that it'll be interesting for me to participate in this. And but you're 100%, cyber falls exactly into this. Yeah. And we have to learn how to properly defend ourselves, but also offensively counter it.
Well, when you started, it went from non-internet to internet, and I remember at around that time they were complaining that the CIA didn't have enough people on the ground, right? That there were not enough people in these countries who spoke the language, who knew how to do that.
Sure, and that's been a criticism, and I would argue we need to have Russian speakers and Chinese speakers. We better also have smart tech folks. We better have the folks with that huge forehead, big brain who can do that offensive cyber operations.
The nerds. We need the nerds.
That works for me.
There are a few more topics I must get to, but first, Marc, I got to put you on the spot. Who would have made a better spy, Carm or me? And you will not offend Carmela. You will not offend her.
Hand down, I would be. Don't even bother to answer.
You would never suspect her, right? You would never.
That's right. You never suspect. That's the whole idea. You got to be able to.
Little grandma.
Was there any kind of age limit on recruitment? Like you don't want someone with senior moments, right?
He wants me to earn a little bit.
But think about it, and this is a serious topic. So the CIA recently was criticized for some social media posts where they're quote being too woke and stuff like that, and because the CIA is correctly promoting kind of diversity and inclusion issues. And my response to this is I don't care about if you think their advertisements are silly. The fundamental point is, and this is what I wanted as a CIA manager in the field. Guess what I don't want? I don't want a bunch of people who look like Joel and I. That doesn't work. Because ultimately, but I'm being serious. So you want a diverse workforce because what do you do with the CIA? You got to be in the shadows. You got, the hostile intelligence service, has to say, well, that person, that little old lady there's no way she could be a spy. Well, what if she was? And so.
But wait a minute. I heard the first time here that you will be in the working for the Atlantic, and I'm gonna reveal myself now. I have been a CIA agent for the last.
Carm, you signed the agreement, Carm. You can't tell anybody. I mean, what a plot twist!
Really good point, though, because so I always joke in the book. I talk about how some of our most successful operations officers in the Middle East were female operations officers because the Arab intelligence service chiefs. Couldn't fathom that a girl would be a spy. Yeah. And I tell the story, and this is a true story of we were in the Middle East, and I was a manager in the station, and we had a female officer out on an operational act, and she was unfortunately seen, in essence, caught. And as we got a report, we had a penetration of that service, so we would understand how they would be looking at us at the U.S. Embassy. When we did so, they actually said, "Oh, this lady was caught in operational act. She must be doing it for who? For her husband." And they put all the surveillance resources on her poor husband, who was like, "What the hell? I didn't do this. My wife was the one who got caught. We're laughing about it."
Yeah, but that's the culture. That's the culture of the place.
But Carm, that's how we beat our adversaries. So you understand, and that's why we need a diverse workforce.
I'm volunteering.
It's the best athlete approach. So that's my response, because when everyone gets so upset about all this stuff that's supposed to be woke, I was like, well, just look, I need people to go out in the street and not get caught. And guess what? A bunch of white dudes, might not be the best fit. And so sorry. And of course, I'm saying that as a white dude. And, it's pretty funny.
Carm, if the podcast doesn't work out, you can become a spy.
Thank you.
So, Marc, got to get your take on this. What went through your mind when you saw what was going on January 6th?
Oh, it was very depressing for me because I thought I do to this day, I think that was a shameful day for the United States. But for me, one of the things I always believed in was this concept of American exceptionalism, because I worked for the United States government, and my job was to represent the U.S. government overseas, and people really do care what happens here. And I thought that was a great stain on the United States, and I was embarrassed by that. So because ultimately what makes us different is our democratic, system, and the fact that we can go to other countries and say, we have this is the model that you should follow. I think that really did a lot of damage. And so 6th January was something I was really upset about. And hopefully, look, there's all sorts of kind of turmoil over the investigation. I believe there should be one. But ultimately we can't have that ever happen again, because that kind of, not only in terms of the foundations of the United States and institutions that we need to be sacrosanct, but also how other people around the world see us. And the amazing thing is, as in all my travels, the majority of people, not the majority, many people that you would never imagine, whether I'm in Egypt or Syria or Kuwait, could probably tell you more about representative American democracy than a lot of Americans could, because we really are that ideal. I believe in that concept of that the U.S. is this shining city on the hill. I will always do so. People think I'm corny saying this.
He's the same.
But we can't have things like 6th January, and I think that is just such a stain on us. And
I am an older generation, and maybe I'm a little cynical too. And I did not detect in your book one drop of cynicism or anything of that nature. But I'm wondering, where was the FBI?
Right. I mean, that's right. So we have to find out. I mean, this was a pretty dramatic intelligence failure that day.
And it's not the CIA; it's the FBI.
Thank God. Finally,
it wouldn't have happened if the CIA was in charge. No, but let me ask you. So, back in 2020, Senator Mark Warner he wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post. I pulled this because I thought it was interesting. He said the following: efforts by this president, meaning President Trump, to intimidate U.S. intelligence services may be politically advantageous in the short term, but over time, the consequences for our country will be disastrous. Do you fault? I mean, I personally think President Trump took things way too far, and I think he's a big reason for the
polarization.
God, thank God I don't have to say it on TV.
Now he lost it. He picked up from me.
I know you've got to be somewhat political, but do you point your finger at him, because he was really picking on the intelligence agencies?
Well, I do, and that made me very upset. One of the reasons, why also I wanted to speak out was because he made it kind of a sport to be bashing the intelligence community. You talked about the deep state, which is nonsensical. I joke around all the time. I tweet out about this constantly. But there's going to be a deep state meeting at this Northern Virginia bar that we're
at the Vienna Inn.
That's right. But I think that it was incredibly damaging, and there was absolutely no reason to do it. And I think that not to get too political here, but there is the Republican Party that I knew in the past, that people that I really liked, like George W. Bush, who I think is a really good human being. That's long gone, and President Trump, I think, brought out a lot of the worst in people, and that to me was really sad. And I think just for the good of the country, it would be good if the Republican Party moved on. I hope it will, because his attacks on the intelligence community, these are men and women who work in the shadows tirelessly, and get no praise. And so for him to have these kind of unjustified attacks and this ludicrous idea of a deep state, I mean, for God's sakes, it was, and now fortunately, most of my colleagues would just, put their nose to the ground and ignore this. The best thing about being at CIA headquarters is you don't have access to Twitter, thank God. So people would be like, can you believe what Trump tweeted today? I'm like, I know, and I don't know what it is, but maybe I shouldn't even try to find out, because he'd be saying something bashing the agency or the FBI or someone. But I want America to move on. I don't mind that there are policy differences between the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. President Biden, who I was an intern for President Biden right after college. I mean, I like him. He also is putting forward a staggering spending plan. In the trillions. that's going to change kind of the nature of the relationship between the American people and government. It's okay to have that debate. Like, it's good, it's healthy. The Republicans should be screaming, this is too much, and the Democrats should be saying, but we need this. That's the kind of debate we need. We don't need, a President Trump with all kind of the crazy that was involved. I mean, and I go back to the idea of America as an example for the world. This was not good. For those of us who served overseas, it was pretty damn hard to explain what this guy was doing every day. I think it was really damaging, and and ultimately, I don't think the history books are going to be very favorable.
But Marc, you kind of, when you spoke earlier, where you appear on TV, you go on CNN, MSNBC,
and
Fox. So you really like an equal distribution of.
But my dad gets so pissed at me that I go on Fox. He gets mad all the time. So Joel, just before this, I was on Megyn Kelly's show.
Oh wow, doing her podcast or?
Yeah, she was her live show 12 to 2, and then that comes on. So and then I guess it'll be on this afternoon. Whatever it is. And so I'll go talk to anybody at any time. I've done all sorts of different interviews. I was on Brian Kilmeade, at his radio show. But I think it's important, for me to be credible, and even if I have my political opinions on things, I can't shy away from one place or another. And the irony of this as a former CIA officer, put this into perspective. I worked for the CIA. I was involved in CIA's counterterrorism operations around the globe, meaning I probably, and I will say it, leave it at that, probably did a lot of things that a lot of people may be uncomfortable with. So in the age of Trump, I was embraced by the left because Trump was attacking the deep state. But you know what? I'm not that comfortable with them. They're not comfortable with me because I work for the CIA. And so everybody's always mad.
So nobody loves you.
Perfect. No, but that's great. But that's where you want to be. I think ultimately. And so as someone, and I was very open in the press about this, I certainly supported President Biden. I did not like President Trump. I also do a weekly column for the Washington Examiner.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up. That's right.
They called me up and they asked me, they said, do you want to do this weekly column? And I said, Tom Rogan, who runs the opinion page, I said, Tom, you realize, I don't think your readers might like me all that much. He's like, no, fine. We need to, and because I say I'm very moderate, I'm very centrist. But that's the great thing about America. So you can just kind of go out and do these things, and everyone always underestimates
What about all this talk that Biden is compromised cognitively? You buy into that?
Oh, I don't know. I would. Here's my so it's clear that he slowed down. Mm-hmm. There's no doubt about that. But he's also old. That's okay. That's what happens. I'm sorry with people. I'm 51. I've slowed down. But here's the thing.
By the way, you're 52. You're not 51. Aren't you 52?
It's a child.
I'm 52.
You are children. You are our children.
But here's my contention, and I really believe this. And God forbid if anyone gets mad. We shouldn't allow presidents to be president after they're 70. That's crazy. You don't allow a CIA officer to work that way. You don't allow a judge. You don't allow a police officer. You don't allow anybody on the planet to work. And we're talking about presidents in their 80s. This is crazy. And same thing for the House and the Senate. We have people in the Senate in their 80s and 90s. This is nuts. And so I'm sorry, but there's a time. We're supposed to retire at 65 as a CIA officer. I'm sorry. I think the president of the United States is a little more important than me and whatever I did. And so the idea that I think it's time for
so.
No. But I think
Marc's more important.
I think definitely to us, yes. But I think. Just the mere fact that it takes enormous energy to carry on from morning to evening.
Yeah.
Well, Trump had the energy, just misused it. Marc, give us one story that you have not shared on another podcast. Do me that favor.
The story is he hates his friends from Highland Park.
No, not at all. Not at all. Stories I haven't shared. Well, I've done so many of these things. Guys, I got to think of, now you're putting me on the spot. But, I think that,
you sat in the Oval Office, I assume.
I've met presidents before. It wasn't at the Oval Office, but I think, I think that the story that I love talking about kind of the most would be, and it's a personal story. Mm-hmm. It happened in several different locations around the world where I'd be walking out at night, and I'd pass by the U.S. Embassy and I'd see the American flag, just the silhouette of that flag. And that was really important to me for two reasons. One is I knew there was a whole bunch of Americans who were, perhaps serving in a country which was not a friend of the United States. So, we were there representing America, but I also knew that flag meant something to the people of that country. And so, because ultimately America stands for something. And that to me as a CIA officer really meant a lot. Here's the story that I'll tell you. I love this story. So I was in, I got to be careful because I can't say the country I was in, but I was in the Levant, in the Middle East. And I remember someone came to the visa window and they wanted a visa to come to the United States. And we said, okay. And part of the questioning that we'd give would be, do you support any kind of political or terrorist organizations? And this young lady said, well, yes, I love Hezbollah. and we were taken aback and we said, but you want a visa to the United States? She said, well, absolutely. America is the land of freedom. And I said, you're supporting a terrorist organization that's killed Americans. And she looked at me kind of puzzled. And she goes, but I want to come to America. And so it's a crazy story, but that's the essence of what America. Now we denied her the visa, just like you said. But that's the essence of what America really means overseas. And I think, unless you've traveled a lot or had these experiences I've had, that meant so much to me, which goes back to, we got to get our crap together internally here. Because America really does stand for something. And I'm still optimistic that we can. And we're going through some tough times, but there's a lot of people around the world who really look at the United States that it really means something. It's an idea.
Yeah, one thing that really stood out to me in one of the other podcasts I was listening to, I think it was some special forces guys talking to you or ex-military.
That was the drunken podcast.
Oh, I love that. And they were asking you, how do you recruit officers and agents overseas? And you said, it could be something as simple as their kids want to go to school in America, or they could be Pittsburgh Steelers fans and you want to get a Roethlisberger helmet signed.
It's true.
I mean, that's wild. What are you waving me off for, Carm?
Because you are off the screen.
Oh.
Yeah.
I have to worry about these things.
You do.
Wow, this is amazing. So, Marc, two final quick questions. What is the biggest terror threat right now, in your opinion?
That's a great question.
Because
I want to know.
I mean, we've got Al-Qaeda that people are worried could reform now that Afghanistan's gone. And we've got things like you talked about with Carmela earlier, like Killware. There was a plot thwarted, I think, by the FBI, not the CIA, where they were trying to poison a water treatment plant in Florida. Do we die at the hands of Al-Qaeda potentially, or through software?
Well, I would say that you have to differentiate two things. One is it domestic terrorism or international terrorism? So that's kind of the big thing. I think there is a domestic terrorist threat now in the United States, and you do have a threat from kind of Islamic militant groups as well. In terms of Al-Qaeda, who is probably going to is going to kind of resuscitate themselves, as well as ISIS. But the one thing that I think we have to remember is, while we do have these threats, it's not like the old days of the Cold War where we risk kind of the annihilation of the country, and I think that you have to keep that in perspective. And so we have to have a kind of a strong, robust counterterrorism capability, but we know how to do this. And so in terms of kind of the traditional terrorist groups, in terms of kind of the cyber stuff, I mean that's pretty scary. And that's something that we haven't seen kind of Islamic militant groups undertake cyber attacks. Most of these cyber attacks come from state actors, frankly, the Russians, the Chinese, or the Iranians. But again, as we kind of shift from this world of 20-year war on counterterrorism to what we call great power competition with China and Iran, we have to have strong defenses. And I'll tell you this: that every president, when they get into the Oval Office, they've run a campaign. Not necessarily President Biden, because he had a lot of experience before, but when you step and you sit in that chair, and I think this happened with President Obama, certainly, you realize the weight of the world is on you because there is such a unique nature of threats that the country faces. So that's kind of a long-winded answer, that the threats are still out there. We know how to take care of these things. I think on the cyber view, we got to get better. But that's what the American people expect, the U.S. government to do. That's a fundamental part of what government, regardless of your ideology, is expected.
My niece just graduated from MIT. I hope that the CIA is recruiting some of those people for software. Carm, last question.
No. I wanted to tell you.
Carm, by the way, Marc has a classic track record
syndrome.
of a syndrome of
you
continuing.
Are off the screen
as I try to rap, she goes on and on. Carm?
There you go.
No, I have to tell you one thing I learned from this book. Many things.
Clarity in crisis. Clarity in crisis.
And so far, I don't live by this, but I will now work on living by this. That when there is a mistake, I have to own up to it.
Absolutely.
And when there is a success, I have to let my team members.
Give credit for it. Yep.
Yeah, and you're excellent at that part, Carm. Don't worry. One final big overarching question, because I've heard this brought up a lot on social media. Does the state of our democracy, does it last? Will we be a democratic country 200 years from now?
Oh my God!
Look, I still have faith. I really do, and our institutions barely, but they did hold under the last administration. I don't think you're going to find someone like a President Trump, in the future. And so, I think we have to kind of have faith that because it's the greatest system, as imperfect as it is. But I think it's still something that people can agree is worth saving. And perhaps we make too much of a small minority of people who certainly look, at the end of the day, I don't condemn all Trump voters for being undemocratic. That's not fair to them. There's so many reasons why Trump was popular, and we have a whole other podcast for that. I think we have to embrace those that that certainly kind of fell under his spell. I think for the first time, America really kind of was subject to a cult-like leader, which was really disturbing for me because I lived in the Middle East with all these autocrats. But I would expect that the Republican Party is going to move away, and then we'll just have kind of just normal policy debates. Look, the norms that Trump challenged, I think people are going to be really careful of in the future. And things like the U.S. military and the Justice Department did hold. They really did. And so I have some faith in that. And I want to get back to good old fights over what should be the right size of the U.S. government. Charges that the Democrats have are pursuing a socialist agenda. I mean, I think that's a little exaggerated, but you know what? I'd much rather have that debate than some of the craziness that happened under the Trump administration. And so I think we'll be okay. And I can't help but try to be optimistic. I didn't work for 26 years, representing this country for me not to be. And so I still have some hope. My son played baseball growing up, and he played travel baseball. So we traveled all over the South. I've spent tons of time in Trump country. And these are great Americans, and they're wonderful people, and they just I think fell under the spell of someone who I don't really think is a good person. But it's okay, and we have to understand them, and I think we have to kind of just move on and get back to kind of the regular politics of what this country kind of was based on for a long time.
Amen.
I'm still optimistic.
Hey, Mark, who interrupted who more, me or my mom?
No, because we have a competition. Who will?
I think your mom.
I like to win.
He said you interrupted more.
It's okay. You guys always team up against your parents.
No, but you're the better spy. You're the better spy.
Thank you.
Mark, promise me one thing. We stay in touch, buddy.
Oh, I'd love that. This was really fun. And next time I come down to Florida, I gotta swing on by. That'll be awesome. I would love to see you.
100%. Hit me up. We're in Miami. The book is Clarity in Crisis. I'm going to email you. I want to share phone numbers. Stay in touch. There's no
and I really enjoy this. It's very informative and it's great.
You made Highland Park.
By the way,
we are very thank you for your service.
She's right. Hold on. Hold on. You just gave us a plug and you interrupted. Say that again, Mark.
Hands down, the most fun podcast. The little shtick you guys have doing. You got to take this, internationally, because this was great. I honestly, I think listeners should love it. It's really fun, being involved in this. I do several of these each week, and this was a blast.
Awesome. Please share far and wide. We check our analytics. It's so weird. We have listeners or viewers in Pakistan, and we can't figure out why. Yeah.
They were planted there by us.
They're the spies. Carm, what was your final introduction?
I wanted to thank you for your. I really do. I really do, because I think you chose a profession that is scary, and you were very brave, and you did very great service to all of us. And thank you very much.
You made Highland Park proud, man.
Yes.
We'll be right back with the news schmooze.
Welcome back. It's time for the news schmooze.
You know, that was so bizarre for me. I mean, I watch podcasts like I told you, but I really, truly mean this. Highland Park is a small, tight-knit community. And even though I'm now 52, and by the way, I don't get how Marc is 51. I think he's wrong about his age. He said he's 51. He was born in 69. I think Marc is wrong about his age. I think he thinks he's 51. But he's 52.
Maybe he was
I know
born
for a fact
in
that,
December.
No, he was born in June. I know that. I don't remember the exact date.
All right, forget about it.
But these are the weird things that I remember. But, you know, more than being a covert spy for the CIA, he was a really good friend. Him and Matt Kaufman and all these other guys I grew up with. We had a lot of laughs. Things that, you know, Marc's not allowed to share secrets. I can't tell you some of the things that I know about Marc because it would embarrass him and me. And he's an American hero.
You know what?
He's an American hero.
You want to know something?
What do you think about seeing him? You knew him when he was...
Wait a second. I read in his book that one of the things they don't do, they don't bribe people into becoming agents, like foreign agents, like in
He was recruited out of Cornell.
No.
By the way, I got into Cornell. I don't know if Marc remembers that. I got into Cornell.
Joel,
but decided not to go.
Joel.
Actually, I wanted to go. I got deferred. And then...
Joel, you're
went
not
to Brandeis.
interesting.
I went to Brandeis because I thought I would hate Brandeis, and I did, but I was too lazy to then switch to Cornell.
You want
I
to
could
know
have been
something?
a CIA agent. Everything went south from that point on.
I like the logic. If would have gone to
Did you hear
Cornell?
what Marc said, by the way? And he's been around the world, very intelligent. He said that of all the podcasts, and he's done 1 million podcasts, there is no podcast like our podcast.
Joel, if you would have, very frankly...
By the way, in fighting, in the UFC, when someone wins a fight, they call cutting a promo. Like in their interview, when they're winning, they'll say something like, you know, that Conor McGregor is a total pussy. I'll beat his ass and knock his head into the sidewalk. That's called cutting a promo. So you get the fight with Conor and you get the payday. We just got Marc Polymeropoulos, a covert agent in the CIA, to cut a promo for Surviving the Survivor.
Yeah, I understand, and I'm very happy about it. That's the least he can do.
By the way, this is a whole other segment we still have to get to. So,
Joel, can I just say something to you?
Yeah, speak into the mic.
Why?
So people can hear you.
Okay, but then I cannot turn towards you. Anyway, it was a great, great, great experience. I remember his mom, may she rest in peace. I remember his father.
You're still at it, cracking at it.
I remember him as if the only thing is that he didn't have a beard in high school.
No, I remember watching Rangers games with Marc in his living room.
All right. So to sum it up, we are not famous, but we touch fame. People come and tell me Highland Park is really unusual. There is a lot of talent and a lot of unusual creative people.
It's funny that you mention that. That is why I'm wearing this shirt today. Which
Don't hold it like this.
Which reads talentless, because I've got a chip on my shoulder.
He's fishing for compliments.
No,
Ignore him.
No, I am truly not. After I interviewed people like Marc and David Camp and Sam Hoffman and didn't interview Willie, may he rest in peace, and all the rest.
Well, he
I've
would
got
have
a chip
come,
on the
but he
shoulder.
was very sick already.
He was. I got a chip on my shoulder. I'm happy for them. I'm actually very happy for Marc, not so happy for the other. Kind of happy for David Camp. He's a nice guy. Anyway, let's get on to the news schmooze here.
Okay, do it fast, because it's an anticlimactic.
Carm, you do this once a week, Carm. You have nothing else going on in your life except taking care of my father, so just chill out.
Speak for yourself. I have a secret life that you don't know about.
This is a wild story. I picked this one. I picked these stories kind of for you today, Carm. Pregnancy advocates and others on this, by the way, is a CBS News exclusive, which is the organization I work for now. This is not some fly-by-night piece of crap media outlet. Pregnancy advocates and others on social media are expressing outrage after a 21-year-old Oklahoma woman was convicted. Listen to this, Carm. You're not paying attention. Your ADHD is kicking in. She was 21, convicted of first-degree manslaughter earlier this month. It is October, for having a miscarriage. The prosecutor blamed her because of her alleged use of methamphetamine. Her name is Brittany Pulau. She's a member of the Comanche Nation,
where does she
Native
live?
American.
Where does she live?
This is Oklahoma. You're not paying attention.
Okay.
According to the Comanche County Detention Center, she was sentenced on October 6th by a jury of her peers to 4 years in state prison for first-degree manslaughter for having a miscarriage. Your reaction?
Oh, the Comanche.
The hell does that mean?
I'm joking. I wanted to say that this particular tribe doesn't like cocaine.
It's methamphetamine.
Methamphetamine.
Carm, you definitely can't be president. Mark made a good point. I mean, you
yeah,
gotta know.
Well, I wasn't hurt.
You know what I tell my kids every night?
After 60, yes.
You know what I tell my kids?
After 60,
ask Vita what my most famous expression in the house is. You gotta know when enough is enough. That's said every night at about 8:15 when they
all right, then I had enough. I'm leaving.
On to the next story. Do you know what TikTok is, Carmela?
Yes. Yes.
What is it?
It's like Instagram.
Sort of. There is a this is another story for you. There's a TikTok star. Her name is @MyDataNotYours. That's her name. @MyDataNotYours. Sounds like she should be dating Elon Musk, who's getting divorced, I believe. Unless I just made that up. Anyway, she uploaded a clip for her fans documenting all the information that Amazon had collected about her. She said she put in a request but did not expect them to have too much on her. She was not totally comfortable with what she discovered. It turned out that Amazon had her location, all her phone contacts, thousands and thousands of recordings of her voice collected from products that she, quote unquote, gladly bought and placed in her home. Turned out there were more than 3,534 audio clips that Amazon had of her in their possession. Does this make you scared?
No, because I just type in what I'm ordering. I don't leave my voice.
There's printed data that they get then. Does that make it? Does it make you nervous that they know exactly what you're doing and they sell that data?
My dear, every time there is a button on Amazon that you can press and it shows you what you bought the last 3 years. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
Yeah, so it's no miracle. I mean, I'm not surprised.
Do you think Jeff Bezos ever worries about paying his mortgage?
Joel, no cliches of this kind. You use this joke too many times.
Do you think if he wants to buy a new shirt or a suit, he worries about it? I don't wear suits anymore.
And you don't worry about it.
On to the last. By the way, I have no questions for Grandma, but we'll come up with something.
Wait a minute. She said yesterday, the 5.5-year-old.
Oh, we'll get there. It's not the segment yet. Save it. Don't say it yet. Okay, the last story. Stay on the segment, Carm. Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, otherwise known as Carmela Syndrome or HDHD, is not something that just affects people. Who else do you think it affects?
Probably dogs.
It may be a problem among our pets. A new study reveals dogs can also develop a behavioral condition that resembles ADHD in humans. A team from the University of Helsinki added that gender, age, the dog's breed, and even how much attention their owner pays to them plays a role in whether they develop this condition. Are you surprised that dogs can get this?
No, I'm not, but I have to tell you something.
Or her ADHD, you already switched topics.
Just for the record.
Yeah.
My ADHD, I discovered only at the age of 80. So I coasted through my entire life. And when I was working as a therapist, end of quote, I would jump from topic to topic, and my clients thought that this was a technique that I was using. You get it?
100%.
Okay, that's all. And as far as dogs are concerned, I'm not interested. I'm only interested in human behavior.
Mabel Rose, 100% does not have ADHD. Ethelbug Johnson, that's to be determined.
Yes.
She could be a candidate.
She could be like, yes, this decision is pending. Now, as far
By
as...
the way, Rose, I keep telling you, has allergies. She sneezed last night.
Joel,
and
nobody cares.
Sheets.
Nobody cares.
Nobody cares. It's my dog. She has allergies. I don't want to give her medicine because she's 15 and a half.
I know what your next shirt should say on the front.
The vet said I can give her whatever she wants.
You know what
She's
it should?
had a good run. When she dies, you may never hear from me again. What? What should it say on my shirt? Say it.
No.
Say it, Carm.
No.
Say it, Carm.
No, I can't because it stays forever.
Say it, Carm.
This says talentless.
Yeah, speak into the mic.
And the other would be self-focused.
Wow. We'll be right back with 3 or 1 or a half a question for Grandma.
It's time now for 3 questions for Grandma.
All right, Carm, this is the second week in a row that my day job, working at CBS News, has eaten into my other avocation, which is this podcast, and I did not have time because I am now an absentee father. Did not have time to get the 3 questions because I'm working too much, which, by the way, today, my kids, my middle one has a play date, and the older one is invited to the play date, along with my son, Judah Mack, who is 2.5 and change. And Vita, the oldest, said to my wife, how dare you schedule a play date today? And my wife was bewildered because I usually love to go on play dates. And she said, what are you talking about? She goes, Wednesday is podcast day and daddy is home early. And that's my day to spend with my daddy.
For this alone, it was worth for you to carry this child for 9 months and give birth to it.
Now, I did not get questions, but they visited you yesterday, and I understand Z-Bugs had a question for you.
No, you're wrong. Zizi came up to me.
It's Z-I-Z-I, which is named after your 2 fathers, one who was gassed in the Holocaust, Lotzi, and then your stepfather, who's also, his name was Lotzi, and I named the kids Zizi after Lotzi. And to this day, you laugh at it, like you are right now, and it's the most meaningful name in the family, and you can't say it. You say Zizi. It's Zizi. She's both your fathers wrapped in one.
Okay, sorry, everybody. The point is that Zizi came up to me yesterday, looked me in the eyes, as she usually does when she wants attention, and she said to me, I have a question for you, questions for the grandma, but I will not give it to you. I'll give it to my daddy.
And so she didn't reveal it?
No.
So we don't have any questions. Well, I guess the segment is now called No Questions for Grandma.
Sorry, we are tired from all this CIA stress.
People say bullshit stuff, but I think Marc honestly believes that this is a great podcast, and I do too. And I do too. I hate to end on a sad note, but I will. So, Marc, we previously dedicated a podcast to this person, but I'm going to rededicate this podcast to the great Josh Mitnick, who's no longer with us, which I cannot fathom. I really cannot wrap my head around it. But Marc played high school tennis with Josh. We were all friends with Josh. Josh was a very, very well-known journalist in the Middle East. He worked for the Wall Street Journal. He worked for Israeli newspapers. He worked for the
Los
LA
Angeles Times. Yeah.
He worked for everyone, got his obit written up in all the papers as he should have. But I actually shared that news with Marc and news about the funeral, and Marc was absolutely devastated. He had been in touch with Josh because Marc lived in the Middle East. So we are always thinking of Josh. Hashtag be like Josh. That's what I tell my kids. I've now thoroughly depressed myself, Carmela. I covered a 28-year-old cop, 4 years on the force, gets in a scuffle with a 18-year-old suspect. The guy pulls a gun from his waistband and shoots this cop between the ear and the jaw and kills him. And the pastor last night at this vigil said one thing: we are not guaranteed tomorrow. We're not even guaranteed later in the day, he said.
I know that.
I got her to not respond finally.
Well, I did respond. I said, I know that.
In all seriousness, who interrupted more on this podcast? Me or
Definitely you.
Marc said it was you. But he
because
said you'd be a better
he's your
spy.
friend.
Love you, America. We'll be back next week. Have a great week.
Love you, America. Bye.